Welcome to the Suicide Prevention Show, where we are waking up the world to the power of positivity, making suicide, especially teen suicide, a thing of the past. And now we're going to go where people don't want to go. So I'm really happy that you're here for this particular segment because let's face it, there are all kinds of ways to kill yourself. And we're going to talk about one of them that most people don't talk about in this context. We're going to be talking with Cheryl Millett about what's fat got to do with it. Now, this is the Suicide Prevention Show, so you know this is likely to be fun. So Cheryl, please join me in the studio. And if you wave your magic wand, there you go. Hey!
Hello, everyone. Hello, Jackie.
Hello, Cheryl. I'm so excited to see you.
Oh, likewise. Great show. Congrats. I know we're the last one for the summit in some ways, but never the last.
We are bringing it home, and we're going to be bringing it home to everyone on this highly personal and potentially controversial topic. But now, I'm going to ask, because this is kind of an elephant in the room question, okay? How did you end up in this whole fat conversation? What's your story?
Oh, well, I'm going to have to say that things just fall in your lap as a lot of people recognize the journey. And I worked in food processing for 20 years, so I was very familiar with food processing. But what I wasn't familiar with is I wasn't familiar with how important fat is to the brain, is to the body, and how the Inuit people had a source of fat that would change the way children, autism, ADHD, how the mind would work, how the brain would work. And in that big word inflammation, which is part of every condition, supposedly, according to all the experts out there. Yeah, so fat just seems like, to your point, it's like the elephant in the room. People don't want to talk about it.
Wow. Okay, you just said a whole lot. I want to unpack a little bit of this. You're talking about a population, the Inuits, right?
Yes.
And so they live Alaska?
Well, you can think of it all across the top. Alaska. We have a new territory here in Canada, Nunavut. And so the territories along the top, they actually live in Greenland as well, and even the north. So you just think of the Arctic Circle, really.
All right. So when we talk about the top, we're talking about the top of the world. You know, where it's white on a globe.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So it's cold. So what they brought into the world, you said, is part of what could be part of the conversation around a bunch of things. Because I heard ADD, that's on my mind, autism. I have a grandchild on the spectrum. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about brain chemistry and fat, and a very specific kind. All right. So what's your story? Because that's the fat story, and we're going to get there. So, by the way, this is the story of fat.
Yeah, this is the story of fat. I'm going to say, as things do fall into your lap, I was so curious about what it was. But the first day that I took this oil, which is raw, by the way, I mean, people aren't familiar. I'm familiar with food processing, but it's like my brain turned on the very first day. I felt taller. That's how I described it. But you don't really know that you're deficient in these healthy fats until you get them, right? It would just be unknown to you.
Okay, so we got normal schlepping along, life is good. And then someone said, hey, try this fat. I can only imagine that conversation. Hey, try this fat. And it changed your brain. It changed your body posture.
Yeah. So I've spent the last 12 years exploring what that's all about. As a holistic practitioner, I already knew a little bit of this or that in food processing. And if that oil had not been raw, I would not have touched it with a two by four. But because it was raw, that makes a difference is the raw oils make a difference
Well,
to
wait a
our
minute,
brain.
wait a minute, wait a minute. You're in the processed food industry,
I was.
and you wouldn't. Okay. Oh, how long ago did you leave the processed food industry?
It'd be it'd be like 13 years ago.
Got it. Why'd you leave?
Why? Well, because I wanted to work on my own. I wanted to be my own boss. My whole life, I've been both the entrepreneur and working for somebody else. And I just asked myself, what did I want to do to help people, to make a difference for the rest of my life? And it wasn't sitting behind a computer. I was in trade. I did commodities trading. I did purchasing, very analytical stuff. But I've always used both sides of my brain. So it was one of those things going, okay, it's time to get creative. And I explored. I probably did about 6 or 7 years of schooling before I left. I started my business 2 years before I left the corporate world as
Got it.
well.
All right. So you're working in processed foods. What business did you start?
Well, it's a health business, right? It's just I became a holistic nutritionist.
Hold it. Yeah. Now I'm into contrast. Processed food and a health business. Those
Mhm.
do seem to be mutually exclusive somehow in my mind.
Yeah, but the interesting thing, I'll say for a lot of us, the contrasts are beautiful because like you're in something. And I've been to an oil refinery, I've been to a sugar refinery, and I've been to a cocoa plantation, I've been to farm salmon, pulp and paper, cookie make, bread plant. I've been to a number of, I've seen them with my own eyes and been able to ask interesting questions, which this is where I can absolutely share all kinds of interesting things here tonight. But fat matters, fat, not only how we look,
Mhm.
but how our body functions.
Cool. Okay. So fat matters, I think, is a great topic. I mean, when we chose the topic for our conversation tonight, what's fat got to do with it? I'm
Mhm.
like, that'll at least give me a placeholder, but fat matters. The fat talk. These are the things that most people don't talk about. And we're going to go where angels fear to tread because we are not talking necessarily about the fat that we carry, but the fat that we take in, that we ingest. And they're connected, but there's also, I think, a lot here that we can unpack for people where they're not connected.
Mhm.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can look at the fat that you have on your body as the fat that somehow at some point you did ingest or it converted, from calories. But that fat is holding on to toxins, right? It's a survival mechanism as well. So the fat or anything fat this way or that way has value. It has value. It tells us something.
Cool. All right. So let's take us on the journey because we've got the two different fat tracks. There we go.
Mhm.
We have two different fat tracks. We have the fat that we carry and what its function is in the world. And then we have the fat that we ingest and the difference it makes.
Yes. Yeah.
Cool.
I'll try to sum it up, Jackie.
Well, which way do you want to go first?
Well, let's talk about the fat that we ingest.
Okay.
Let's talk about that. And where I'll probably start with is, and most people to understand is, well, where do we find the fat in our body? I mean, just not the fat that we kind of visually see and pay attention to, but the brain. That's why they call you fathead, right?
Oh,
Fathead.
really?
Because well, yeah, you have a fathead, but the gray matter that we have up there is mostly dependent on these essential fatty acids, cholesterol too, but it's fat. But every cell in your body, we're made of trillions of cells, and each and every cell is dependent upon fat, these fatty acids, these essential fatty acids. So not all fats are created equal, is another good title. So people are familiar with olive oil, they're familiar with butter, they're familiar with fish oil, they're familiar with seed oils, walnut oil, avocado oil. They're filled with all these, and they have a recipe within themselves of the different fats. There's mainly 3 of them, but the idea is the essential fats are the omega-6s and omega-3s.
Hold it. You said there are 3. Tell us
Yes.
what the 3 are, because then you went down to 2. So my brain said, wait a minute, I'm missing one. Okay.
Yeah.
So what are
Okay.
the 3, what are the 3 fats?
Let's go to the 3. The 3 is saturated fat. That's what most people are used to. That's it's usually hard at room temperature. That's the coconut fat, the butter. And then the other one is the monounsaturated fats, which most people are familiar with as the olive oils.
Got
Right?
it.
Here are the olive oils, the avocado. Then you have the polyunsaturated fats, or the PUFAs as they call them. And these polyunsaturated fats within that category is 2 that they found to be essential for our body, which means we don't produce them and we need them from external sources. And those 2 are the omega-6 and the omega-3.
Oh, cool. Okay, so I never understood this before, so I'm fascinated already. All right. So got those 3. Thank you.
Okay, so when we get down to the omega-6 and the omega-3, which are the essential, they have such valuable, how can I say it, being part of every cell membrane, being in the brain. They're actually global in our body as far as usages. But if to make sense of it, to make logical sense for people, it helps build our certain hormones that regulates many of the functions of our body, the temperature, all of that. And it helps manage inflammation, which is that big word I mentioned earlier and is a word that's being thrown around, inflammation. And inflammation happens in the brain. They'll say, people are depressed, they find inflammation in the brain. When people have cancer, there's inflammation. ADHD, there's inflammation. So inflammation, and I wrote a book on this. I lectured on it for several years, but the idea is there's stages of disease, 7 stages. And inflammation is the middle one. It's the turning point within the body where you'll have discomfort, pain, perhaps. You will have a condition, a diagnosis of a condition, swelling, heat, fevers, infectious, anytime you have infection, you're having inflammatory symptoms, right? Fever, redness. You have an injury, same thing, swelling, heat, redness. It's that happens. The only thing that kind of comes into play here is quality. Quality of the fats. So if we jump out from what the body uses it for, I mean, it is fat in itself, any fat can be, how can I say, it can be your padding in your body, right? Your lubricant on your skin, but it's the type of fats and the quality of fat that makes the body tick. As one scientist said is in my walk club, not one is like the other. So if you're missing certain ones, you're missing out. And the only thing with the omega-3 and quality is omega-3 oxidizes. I'm not sure what people understand oxidizes, but if you think of metal and there's, the rain and the oxidizing the air, it rusts, right?
Yeah.
So oxidizing happens to foods as well when they're exposed to heat, air, light, and oxygen. And yeah.
Is oxidizing food a good thing?
It is. Now, how I'm going to explain it, though, you have to come from doing oxidizing food in a composting way is very normal. It's like anything we want things to be broken down in nature, right? Plants, bodies. So, but where it's not good is where you're trying to consume it for your nourishment. We say, so there's a difference there. Oxygen can be good, as we know, for breathing and in our air, but then it can also be problematic, but that's nature. So nature becomes a player in just about anything.
Well, there we go. It's what it was designed for and then what we're using it for.
Yes. And so oxidizing fats become problematic. I think people are familiar with, but if they're not, antioxidants, right? Antioxidants.
Yeah.
It helps with the oxidative or free radicals, things that are kind of rambunctious in a way that we don't really need them. And they come in many different ways and shapes and sizes, but the body has to offset that.
Yeah. When you say helps, it means it helps get rid of them.
Mhm.
Got it. It doesn't help them grow and proliferate. It's about not having those in our bodies.
Yeah, it kind of calms them. So if you have to think of free radicals are like little brats running around, and then they're like little brats running around, and they can come in many different ways, again, through breathing, through food. And so what happens is you just take the hand of the brat, and then the brat is, and so the antioxidant comes in, and it calms that molecule. It makes it stable. So then it's not causing the damage that we see from free radicals, be it cardiovascular or anywhere in the body, chemicals or synthetic molecules.
Mm-hmm.
They don't really help us be the brick house. That's what I will say. So if you had to think of your body like a brick house with 3 little pigs, and then you have the straw house, depending on if you're missing these fats, like there's Japanese researchers in 600 peer-reviewed studies said that the imbalance of omega-6 to omega-3 in our body is the key reason for all chronic inflammation, including mental illness. It's a big
Whoa.
statement.
That's a big statement. You said all. I mean, that's an absolute word. So
Yeah.
it's the imbalance between those two polyunsaturated fats.
Mm-hmm. But they're both good. They're both good. So if I had to describe it, through me listening to many others who speak to it, just didn't make sense that something would be essential and then yet be bad. So here's in the industry, the holistic industry, quite often people will talk to omega-6 is bad. Omega-6 is bad. You don't want omega-6s, but omega-6s, I'm just going to kind of do an analogy. Omega-6s create inflammation, which
Okay.
in presentations people say, well, isn't that bad, Cheryl? And omega-3 is homologs, like they're like a married couple, a male, female. They're different, yet they need each other. So the omega-6 causes inflammation needed by the body, which I'll explain in a minute. And omega-3 actually brings down inflammation. So they work together.
And I can see where balancing could become key.
Yes. So if you have no omega-3, which is harder to get in our diet and very susceptible to being oxidized, if that is very, very low and all you have is unhealthy omega-6s, which is what most people have today with vegetable oil. So vegetable oil, whether it's organic or not, they're all refined. And this is why I say to people, okay, you read vegetable oil and your labels in your foods. You understand it there. And for the most part, it says vegetable oil. It could be soybean, it could be canola, or they may not say it all. It might just say vegetable oil. And it can say organic or not. But it's all refined. Now you tell me if this sounds attractive. Refined, bleached, and deodorized.
What? What? I had no clue.
That's the vegetable oil processing that is typically used of your vegetable oil, all seeds, soybeans, sunflower, corn oil. And so they all have a different ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. That's a whole other conversation to understand the ratios of food as in that balance as well. But the quality, back to the quality, it matters. It really matters if it's oxidated or not. So what most people are getting is unhealthy omega-6s and little omega-3 or unhealthy omega-3, right? So they're getting both.
Unhealthy meaning it's been refined too much.
Yes, oxidized, refining, but you can look at it as this. If you buy a piece of salmon, I like to use this as an example for people because they think I'm getting my omega-3s. The polling I did, I'm getting my omega-3s from food share. I'm getting them from chicken, eggs, and I'm getting them from eggs, and I'm getting them from salmon. What people don't understand is that the omegas in the eggs are plant. So they don't convert. So we need to convert plant to our mammal. We're mammals, or let's say we're man, and we need to convert the plant. It's got to be converted. Like vitamin, beta carotene is a vitamin A, and that's got to be converted to retinol. And so we have to convert it. With the egg, it's actually plant. It's a short chain. Not to go into
Okay.
descriptions.
So to make it really simple, what's in the egg we don't absorb.
Right. We would only effectively absorb 2, 3, 4% if our gut is working properly. Now, most people will agree that they have heard time and time again, a dysfunctioning gut is the root cause of all disease, or it's the beginning. It's not the root cause, but it shows up there as being dysfunctioning. Every time I have asked doctors, experts, specialists all around the world, for the last 12 years, I've not discovered anybody who disagrees with that statement. The digestive system is dysfunction every time. So you have to be able to convert. So that's the egg. The other is the salmon, is the other food that most people would say.
Okay, wait. We skipped the chicken.
Yeah. Well, the chicken, the egg. I'm thinking of the egg from the chicken.
Okay,
That's what
so there we go. All right, so those two are lumped together, and our bodies don't get what they've got because it's plant, not mammal.
yeah. So there's a joke to wrap that one up. What's the difference between eggs with omegas and without omegas?
I don't know.
$1.
Huh?
It's just a marketing thing. Eggs have always had omegas in it if they eat a sea diet, right? So chickens are usually omnivores, and so they eat insects. I don't know if anybody remembers the old time cartoons where the chicken is wrestling with a worm
Hmm.
in a hole. So chickens are actually supposed to be omnivores. They love insects and worms, and
Yeah,
they'll
they're
eat
birds.
seeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. So by eating the seeds, they would have an increase of omegas, but not the right ones, or not the ones they're plant. So then if we go to fish, and fish is not like us either. But when it comes to salmon, I say to people, do you eat the skin? Like, oftentimes people were buying salmon initially several years ago or more, we're buying salmon, but fillets of salmon. Well, there's no fat there. There's
Yeah.
no fat there. The fat is, see, protein is water, fat is oil, and they don't mix. Oil and water don't mix. So where the fat is on fish, if people are keenly interested, this is a very important piece. You eat fish twice a week, then you have to understand a couple of things. One, the fats are susceptible to oxidation. That's that smell. So, when you smell that, you got that fishy smell, that's the oxidated fat. This is because the omega-3 oxidizes, which is great for our system within our body because it helps oxygenate our system. So you see how important omega-3 is on that front. But when it comes to salmon, if you don't eat it with the skin on, and then you're not getting any, because most of the fat is where would most of the fat be?
Oh, yeah, it's right. Oh, in the brain
In
of
the
the
head.
salmon?
Yes. So what little fat that you're getting when you buy the fish is between the skin
Yeah.
and the meat, right? The skin
Mhm.
and the meat is where it is. And so that jelly, that fat substance, is actually where all the omega-3 is. But if it's not stored properly or eaten properly or cooked properly on low heat, you will destroy, you will destroy it.
Okay, so now
So
we've got
yeah,
low heat
low heat.
as opposed to broiling it.
Yes, crispy. You know how some people like
Uh-huh.
their skin crispy. But again, it's that short period of time, slow cook. This is when people are actually using fats, I usually guide them to put their fat on their food. I mean, aside from baking it, put it afterwards. So example, stir fry. So you want to stir fry your food, use water to do so. And now they have these pressure cookers that people are using where they don't have to use fat at all, but you need fat. So after that is done, what you do is you toss the fat in after the fact, after the fact.
So we're talking about salmon fat. So we would what?
Well, with salmon fat, that's different. Salmon fat, you just slow cook and you don't want to brown it. So that's the thing that becomes understanding if it's oxidized when it turns brown. If it turns even very dark brown, then you have, let's just call it scrambled the molecules, right?
Okay, that's
Yeah.
really, really important because I had no clue. And we eat a fair amount of salmon and we always broil it. I mean, I'm from Maryland. We put some Old Bay on there and pop it into the broiler.
Yeah.
And
Well, if it cooks quickly that way and your fish gets cooked, it depends on what the fat looks like. That's why keeping the skin on is
uh-huh.
protective for the fat. In the case of salmon, it's very protective.
Okay, so if I'm cooking it skin down and the fish gets cooked and nothing turns brown underneath.
Mhm.
Okay, so it's all right. So maybe I'm not too far off. I'm
No.
feeling better about it now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So that fat is protected by the skin for sure. But if people just take fillets of salmon and they're using fillets, they're missing out on the fat because they don't have it under the
Oh yeah.
skin. And any what little fat that's in there, which is between the layers, that white stuff
Hmm.
that's between the layers of the flesh of the fish
Yeah.
would also be a little bit of omega. So there'll be a teeny bit there, but the majority of it's going to be in the head.
All right. And I don't know anybody who really consumes fish heads right now. So
No.
we'll just go with the fact that the best you can do is to not overcook the fat while you're
Yeah.
cooking the flesh.
Yeah. So same with olive oils. The only thing with omega-3 is they're not found too much in too many foods. So walnuts is one of them, but again, it's plant. So you got to be able to do the conversion. So a lot of people move to fish oils
Yeah.
because they weren't converting when they do tests, because you can get tests done to see what your omega profile is. You can get that test. And a lot of vegans and vegetarians in some of the conferences that I was privy to watch, they were so low. So let's say if you needed a 70, they were 20.
Ah.
So it's a matter of and stress in itself. That big word stress
Mhm.
will interfere with your digestive system.
Mm.
Just immediately. It's like running from a lion. If you think, you don't have time to pick up a fork and nor do you want to eat, because it's not the first on your mind. It's not priority. So I think with foods and eating, and just to help people be grounded and be more solid and manage inflammation, is having the healthy fats, the whole gamut, from saturated to mono to the polyunsaturated. That way, if anybody has dysfunctioning digestive system that they really know that they do, then this is where the raw seal oil comes in, because it can absorb sublingually, because it's mammal like us. Our salivary glands, within our salivary glands, we actually have sublingual glands.
Okay.
And so if you put the raw seal oil under the tongue, it actually absorbs directly into the bloodstream. And I brought this to a blind person who she worked at work, but she had a couple of health issues. I said, "Hey, I'm popping in. I'm over here. I'm coming right by your place. I'll pop in." And when she put it in her mouth and held it for 5 minutes, she actually told me, I didn't tell her what the pathway is, and felt it going right directly into her brain.
Hmm.
Didn't get it on tape, but yeah, so that's, we want to be able to get any, like the foods, we want to be able to get the foods and the nutrition from the foods into our body so that it's being able to be used for our optimum energy and our optimum health.
So this came from a culture that has a very high fat diet. I mean, chewing blubber is one of the things that the culture that lives up here, they absolutely need the insulation. So they consume a lot of fat. I was lucky. I got a little bit of an education. One of my sisters, my sister Millie, was a nurse practitioner on the Aleutian Peninsula. So she provided the health care for that. And, of course, what they eat is salmon. They don't ship down to us down here in the lower 48. Yeah, we get the mid range. Even our high range is their mid range because they keep the good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so understanding that the grades of salmon, does it matter? I mean, does it matter whether I'm doing Pacific wild caught salmon or Atlantic salmon or, you know, does it?
Yeah, the key thing with fish is, as far as the healthy fats, is the cold water fish, right? Which is what we'll talk about salmon, right? Salmon's a cold water fish, so that's important because the cold water fish needs the insulation. And what the Inuit people and have done is they've gotten most of their blubber from the seals, so that's where to them they eat the whole seal. And I remember usually the elder will get the eyeball, just to kind of make it a juicy conversation here. And
Not
but
what we normally would think of as food.
no, but that when we think about the organs and we think about even therapeutics, if you want to work on your adrenals, what the best way is they consume adrenals, right? There's the desiccated um, hormone, like the glands, right? Desiccated glands. So it's a little, you may be a little familiar with that, and maybe you're not. But the Inuit, when it, get to back to your question about salmon, really, if it's wild caught salmon, you're by far, that's just to distinguish this way. There's farmed salmon, and that's mostly on the East Coast because the company I worked for had the farming companies.
Ah,
They really couldn't farm successfully on the West Coast. They never got that. So that's why a lot of the wild salmon's usually from the West Coast. And the farm salmon, not just from our East Coast here as well, there's Chilean as well, and from other areas in the world. But yeah, that's really, I think, the two part. I think it might be just a preference how wild it is, where it comes from, the pinky color, the flavor, but really it won't really matter. If it's wild, you're going to be better off.
got it. Cool. That's really good to know. Okay. So let's continue on this journey because you said we need it all. We need saturated fats, which is the coconut fat, the butter, things that when it gets cold, it gets hard.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we need those. And how much do we need? I mean, are we talking a tablespoon a month, a tablespoon a day? How much do we need?
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit deceiving part about fat. Usually they'll say fats are double the calories of carbs, but that's not true. That's not true. They only came up with a number, and 9 calories per gram or per whatever. And it really isn't that at all. So we'll just we'll just put that out there for that part.
Right. So this
Um,
is not a place to accurately count calories because they've screwed up the system.
Yes, yes. So when people do that, it's like, okay, you're missing out on the boat. But the end of the day is we need the essential fats. That's what we need. The other ones we don't necessarily need, but they are useful. They are really good for moving things through our digestive system. And they're all fats can be used as energy.
Okay, so I'm going to just pause because the essential fats are the omega 3s and 6s.
Correct.
And everything else, the coconut, the butter, the olive, the avocado, these are non-essential but useful.
But useful, exactly. And there is a bit of omegas within those. So when people say, oh, butter's all saturated, that's not entirely true. There's actually, they just say it's saturated because it's mostly saturated, but even olive oil is not all just monounsaturated. There's a bit of saturated, and even with the seal oil, there's a bit of, a bit of the other ones as well, and some cholesterol in there as well. But generally speaking, they're useful. They do add flavor to the food as well, but they are a very good source of energy and lubrication for the body. But they don't get into what I usually call the higher functioning. That's how I kind of segment between the two essential fatty acids, and the other ones can't do the same as the two essential fatty acids. So there's like a higher functioning there,
Okay.
higher functioning.
I know that I'm treading where angels fear to go.
Yeah.
But my guy, Mark,
Uh-huh.
he collects the chicken fat because this is the culture where you make chicken soup, and this is like the cure for everything. And it's made from the chicken fat. So is the chicken fat having these essential or is it good for me? There we go.
Well, it's not going to harm. I mean, within the chicken fat, I mean, there's probably some collagen there too. There's some other things there that, it's just not fat. So collagen has been, it's really, I mean, it's a vain thing as far as skin goes, but it's required, joints and all the connective tissue collagen. So it's very, very good. So it's more in chicken fat than just saying it's fat. There's
Got it.
more there to it. So yeah, no, it's useful. I mean, think of it this way. If you get the chicken,
Yeah.
ideally, one of my 5-finger philosophy is the whole food, because the fats help to absorb the fat soluble vitamins like A and D and E, and then the fat soluble vitamins and the fats help absorb the minerals. So when you're looking at foods, it's to eat the whole foods, especially when there's components of proteins and fats. However, I'm going to just step back one now to move forward 2 paces, is when you have these commercialized animals,
Mm.
right, that you're growing, right, that farmed, they sometimes have an unhealthy fat composition and balance. So for instance, in the wild, deer may only be 5% fat,
Mm-hmm.
but yet they're fattening up the cows with an unhealthy diet called corn, let's say. And when they do that, they actually bring in more fat into the animal, a greater percentage, let's say 10, 12%, double or triple in some cases into that. Now, yes, it is flavor. Yes, it is
Tenderizer.
lubrication, wasting, tenderize. It's all of that. But when I say whole foods, I mean whole foods as they were meant to be, on their natural diet, naturally raised.
So
And
this
that
is where free range chicken, now uncaged, I'm seeing a lot of the labeling for uncaged, might
Mhm.
matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because if they're in their cages, they're not moving much. They're growing, but there might be a protein growth there too as well. And certainly the chickens that are in the barns that are free run, right? So you can have a barn, you can say free run, but it's not outside. And that's the laws in some areas. When
Oh,
they say free run, you can't have outside. See, I get what they're trying to do. I mean, it's safety, it's health safety, it's controlling. Really not a big word, control, control, control. And so the fact of the matter is, you may not be able to buy a truly free run chicken outside as it's eating its own diet, omnivore. They will force it to eat grains, which will create an imbalance.
got it. So it's a challenging thing. I mean, we've because of our health choices, we eat kosher chicken. And so, the rules of that imply that, there are no hormones, there's no antibiotics, there's a bunch of things that we know are not part of their world.
Mhm.
But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're out running around in the sunshine.
Yeah, it may
And
be
so,
big.
short of raising my own, it's just take my best guess.
Well, here's the thing, sometimes, I'll have all the information about the processing, about, just how we think about foods, eating it more fresh, more raw in a sense, low cook or slow cook or no cook. And the idea is when it comes to food, the amount of food you eat is also important. The amount of food, the amount of fat, protein, but I wouldn't get hung up on it. If people know what they're eating and it's closer to whole food, it will be, it'll be a lot better. But it's the mindset around food. So if you're worried about the chocolate cake that you're eating, then that causes more stress on the body, which is why I will do mindful, they call it mindful eating, but it's healthier eating habits. Like one of the things, like I would say blood sugars have a lot to do with the way people kind of stress too, but blood sugars, it all kind of goes hand in hand. The whole metabolism field there. And at times when we're thinking about stress related to food, we get hung up on the food more than we do on the stress. But there's this connection, this mind, this what they say, brain gut connection, right? And the gut is the second brain, as they call it. And you have this whole system that is connected to your whole body, right? Your colon, your large intestine is connected to your whole body. So what kind of there's like a feedback loop, right? And
Mhm.
it's connected. So if things are crazy in the gut, then be it processed foods that you're eating, it causes stress on the rest of the body. And if you're stressed, not necessarily about food, but anything, it hinders the processing, the digestive function.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because that's my background as a stress management consultant. And I kept trying to explain to people that when you're triggered, when you're under stress, the two systems in the body that shut down are healing because your body doesn't need to divert resources to healing the scratch you got yesterday if you're trying to avoid being lacerated in the
Yeah.
moment. And the other system that shuts down is digestion. Your body doesn't need to devote resources to digesting your breakfast if you're trying to avoid becoming lunch for somebody else.
Yeah.
And in our current day and age, we are stress triggered so often that it's a wonder we can digest anything.
Yeah, it's a big issue, and the reason why people go to carbs is because it's easier to convert to energy. It's a very, I mean, if you need to eat anything, and I remember when I was training for marathons, I did a few of them only, but the idea is an experience is you can't eat anything but pure glucose, right? Because your digestive system is not able to, you're running, and running means, okay, you're not going to eat, it wouldn't be good for you. You'll get stitches, as you say, or a pain in your side.
Yeah.
So pure glucose, as in we did it in gels, but drink a lot of water. And, that's what it was. But I think too much food is probably a big thing too out there. And so I started the no snack movement because my daughter was made to cry at school when her grade 6 teacher, she didn't have any snack and he made her cry. So I sat with it for a couple of days and then I sent him a nice email because he and I had a chat when we did parent, child interview. And so I just educated him because he was the fitness teacher too as well. And
Oh,
so I
that's not
educated
good.
him. Yeah, most people don't know this. We eating way too much food. Even diabetics, they don't really know it. They're eating, 3 meals and 2 snacks a day. No, the more food you put in your body, the more insulin you're going to use, and the more side effects, complications you're going to have from the medicine.
So that's really interesting. So are you a proponent of, this fasting? Because now I'm hearing a lot of people doing the intermittent fasting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it's unique to everybody. Again, I see everybody as unique. You have to take every case individually for the reasons you do. I mean, because we could get into 5G conversations, we could get into all the healthy, things that impact our health.
Yeah, I come from the Eastern healing arts world. And so I was exposed to this concept that what's healthy for me to eat is influenced by where I live, what I do for work, what's happening in my family, my blood type, all of these different, influences, my astrological sign. I mean, everything impacts what's the right thing for me to eat when. And it was coming to the understanding that I'm a unique person. The 3 meals a day at certain times of day does not work well for me. I will put on weight like lightning doing that.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that it was because I'm better off to eat after dark.
Yeah,
And
you could do that. Some people have what they call the daylight diet, and they'll only during daylight. They now again, similar to you say you eat at night, or people are night owls or whatever.
Mhm.
The idea is you have to train your body. It's like eliminating a certain time of the day. There's a training, there's an education or whatever. But daylight diet's interesting because when you have the daylight, you produce certain hormones. You're actually going to digest much better that way, and you'll finish through it by the time you wake up. So, right, so there's these cycles that we're going through and digesting and
Mhm.
healing and regenerating. And yeah, so there's much about that. But I don't mind. I mean, when it comes to intermittent fasting, or eat when you're hungry,
Great
eat
concept.
when you're hungry. Yeah,
Yeah.
very, very simple. We've gotten away from that. And because food
Mhm.
companies make a lot of money out of you eating.
Well, and schools run on timetables.
Mhm.
They have a system. And I mean, cruise ships do exactly the same thing. You're going to eat at this time of day. This is when your dinner time is. But what if I'm not hungry? Well, this is when we're serving you dinner. Yeah. So it's about institutionalized systems.
Yes, and I think that that's what, when I think about suicide and I think about these feelings that people get, they're feeling
Mm.
what they're feeling about their life and where they are. Just the word institutions, right? Educational system, a medical system, both parents working, just whole thing around, career, I'll call it career system in some ways, right? It doesn't serve, it doesn't serve our humanity, our relationships, our bonding, our self-love. Like it just, we're looking outside of ourselves for validation, outside of ourselves for acceptance, outside of ourselves to feel loved, when it really comes to self. So food's no different, health, fats are no different. It's what builds you and how you feel. And you have to listen to your body. That's the uniqueness, to listen and to be able to share, right? To be able to share about what you're kind of getting without feeling like you're going to be judged or you're going to be
You're,
ostracized or anything.
you're going to be judged, but that doesn't mean you're going to be ostracized. I
Yeah.
mean, let's face it, we are judgment making machines. Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a little bit, to having done metaphysical work now for 10 years, it takes a bit to step away from the idea of judging. There's reasons why we do it. So you just observe what those reasons are, and then it's almost like the resilience part, or going above, right? And
Hmm.
it's a journey. It's a journey. It's
It's
absolutely a journey.
It is. Oh my goodness. Okay. So
Yeah.
we've taken a journey into the world of fat, and we really just sort of scratched the surface is what I feel, because there's a richness, pardon the pun, there's a richness of information here. It's not just about the flavor of food. It's not just about the nutrients. It's also about the culture.
Mhm.
And so the good news is, for those who like the coconut fat, for those who like the butter, for those who like the avocados and the olive oils, Yeah. I mean, and now, wait a minute. I have a question because you said specifically olive oil and avocado oil.
Mhm.
What about avocados?
Yeah, no, avocado, the foods themselves will have it in it as well. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's, to eat avocados would be a combination, that's the whole food,
Yeah.
essentially. You would get there's not too much water there, but you'd get all the other stuff that comes with, the whole food avocados, but they do oxidize. I mean, it comes to quality, for sure, organic as much as possible. That's just healthy for the planet. But a good olive oil, you will taste the difference between a good organic olive oil. Usually they have these, what I suggest people is go to, there's certain stores out there, all emporiums like olive oil emporiums or olive oil taste testing places.
Ah,
If you find one of these places and you taste the quality of those oils, you taste the pepperiness, you taste the antioxidant part, it's got a more of a stronger taste. You taste those flavors when you go and taste the regular stuff in the store, you'll see the difference, right? So quality has to be has to be a thing because people have sensitivities, right, to things, and they use toxins and certain things in producing fats as well. So that if some toxins are picked up by the toxins that have on the seeds or whatever, or aflatoxins, right, molds and stuff on grains. But at the end of the day, quality makes a difference.
there we go. At the end of the day, when it comes to fat, quality matters.
Quality matters. Yes.
Well, thank you for having the fat conversation with us tonight, Cheryl. I could not be more delighted. This was a wonderful journey. And for everyone, if you've got questions about fat in your world, your fat, the fat you're eating, the fat that people are telling you to eat, you can grab a 30-minute call with Cheryl. Cheryl, this is an amazing. I mean, it really, really is. So the link is in the chat. The link will be in the show notes if you're watching this as a recording. And put in the passcode. When you book your call, put prevention in the comment box so that Cheryl knows that you were part of this conversation, that you have this basic understanding. It will make your conversation with her much more valuable, much more valuable to you because she'll know what you know if you've watched this. And so it'll save you some time, and that's really valuable. So, Cheryl, thank you so very, very much. Oh my goodness, what a great conversation. Now, I'm going to book a call because I've got more questions. So,
Welcome. Welcome to. That'd be great. Thank you, Jack. And thank you for all you do. I mean, at the end of the day, this has been a very it's very informative, and for people who can, I think everybody can benefit actually from it. The awareness.
well, that's the goal. And so the goal of the suicide prevention movement, which is part of the Teen Suicide Prevention Society, is to normalize the conversation and to bring into awareness solutions that are stigma free. That's our whole goal. Now, our process is hosting the show. So thank you very much for being on the summit and through gathering real time data so that we can use this to petition the governments to get them to fund pure prevention programs
Mhm.
and more intervention programs. Because while they're funding some in each, I mean, it's minimal on the pure prevention side. They just started demanding, requiring, I've forgotten the right word, that social emotional learning be part of the public school system curriculum. So
Mm.
that's coming, and that's a pure prevention program. But it's one out of thousands of possible pure prevention programs, which mostly fall under the heading of personal development and
Yeah,
health.
yeah,
And then the intervention programs are needed and they are way underfunded as well. And Cheryl, I almost lost it when I realized that there's money waiting to fund suicide prevention programs, and they're not spending it because the efficacy of the intervention programs is not good.
Right.
They're not able to show that it's working. And so that's why we're on this mission with the society to gather the real-time data so we can show the government that pure prevention programs work. And so that's why we want everyone to engage in this conversation. And as far as I'm concerned, the fat conversation is part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. It really does help people be grounded in thinking, and thinking at a level where they're not foggy. So they really have, they have that brick house, they have that brick house. And there, there's something interesting that happened to me. And you know how they say you ask the universe and you be careful what you ask for. And I remember with clients, having clients, both suicidal and depression, they're two different things, right? They're two different things. So for one day, I was given what depression feels like. And for one day, I was given what suicide feels like. And I asked people, even outside of my practice, what this feels like. And they're two different things. The suicide, you absolutely felt like you were alone. Like it was such a significant, whereas depression almost felt like more sadness, can't take your head off the pillow. And there was really a significant difference. It's almost like you're going around the world and nobody knows, and you're acting normal, more normal than if you're depressed. Depressed, you almost see it, and you can recognize it for if a person's changed behaviors and weepy and stuff like that. But I'm just going to claim it was just one day. So one day is just one day. But at the end of the day, there was a significant difference. So maybe some have a combination of both. I'm not familiar with that.
It's very interesting that you bring this up. And so we'll just take this last 5 minutes and go here.
Mhm.
The distinction that you mentioned is absolutely valid, that suicide is alone. And suicide, and we had this discussion a couple of times, because when someone decides to take their own life, they actually believe they are doing this in service to the people around them, that the world would be better off without them.
Yeah.
And they're in so much pain that they have gotten to a point where this seems to be the only solution.
Yeah. That's what it feels like. It's the only option. So it was, I even mentioned it to my daughter.
Yeah.
Because she approached me. We were in the kitchen and I mentioned to her and I came back out to my office. I was a bit aware of it versus the depression, a little bit aware of it. And she did nothing. Now she was 14 at the time and she did absolutely nothing. So I just was guided to say something that would give her a clue about how I was feeling. And I knew, though, I was more aware of that particular scenario than the depression several months before. But people don't respond to it much. It's almost like it may be blocked in people to think that it's
we're not taught how to respond. And so we get the deer in the headlights. It can't be real. And anything I say is going to make it worse. As soon as and this is the telling thing, as soon as I validate that you're feeling suicidal, it almost feels like I'm giving you permission. And this is where people struggle because we're not taught how to respond.
Yeah, I think that was the biggest thing.
Yeah.
They don't know how to respond. They don't know what to say to it. They're lost.
This is why we ended up creating the Suicide Prevention Advocate Program, so that people know how to respond, because an intervention specialist is not always available.
Mm-hmm.
And even with the 800 numbers and the 24 hours and 7 days a week, sometimes you've got one shot to say one thing. I mean, we're not here to teach people how to be intervention specialists. God willing, you will never have to talk someone off a ledge. But if anyone is willing to open up and say they're having thoughts of suicide, knowing what to say, is so much better than silence, because silence leaves them in the negative echo chamber in their head. And that is where the plans get made at a subconscious level.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's really a telling conversation. And it's sneaky. Depression can be sneaky. People can be actually dealing with depression and not know it for decades. They can be carrying a depressive point of view. They can be depressing thoughts. They can be depressing emotions. They can be struggling with what they now label as seasonal affective disorder, which is the body's natural response to winter.
Yeah.
This is an evolutionarily sound response to the lack of sunshine and cold. Our ancestors hunkered down and didn't move very much because there wasn't a lot of food. They needed to conserve their energy. The wiring is the same in us today. We just don't have a lot of opportunities. This is human hibernation. That's the origins of depression, and it is so misunderstood. And once you start to understand it, then the pathway out of it is simple. But until you understand it, you probably don't even know if you're struggling with it.
Yeah.
I was diagnosed with 2 bouts of clinical depression. Looking back at my history, I have had depression sessions, depressive cycles, going back as young as age 8, because it was when I was 8 that my body weight shifted from being really thin to being really round in one summer. And nobody picked up on it. But if I look at my high school pictures, my picture of myself as a sophomore compared to a junior, the obviousness to me now, looking at those pictures, that in my junior year, I was struggling. But nobody saw it then. Nobody saw it then. I didn't know it then. We're just really not taught how to be self-aware enough to know what we're dealing with. And so that's all part of this journey. And so thank you so much, Cheryl, for being part of the show.
My pleasure.